But that white bubbly stuff is callus. That's all those little cells in there on the cambium layer just multiplying and dividing. So I was reading through the comments on YouTube this morning, and I feel incredibly inspired to answer a question right now. Now, here's the thing. We just recently made a couple videos about hardwood cuttings, and I was using the green giants as an example. But I thought, you know, I made a part 1, then I answered some questions in a part 2. I'm going to make a part 3 because it will answer this little question perfectly, and I want to help you guys in your journey to root these cuttings. Alright, so here's the question, guys. So it comes from just a someone, and it goes, perfect timing. I have one green giant. I was trying to collect them on clearance when I see them for a hedgerow. I'm going to try propagating some cuttings and see what happens. I'm still steadily trying to get something to root for me. I'm learning, and I just realized I didn't know what a callus looked like before rooting. I've mistaken it for mold on the end and tossed some almost successful cuttings. Now I know. Showing the exact look of callus formation and signs of rooting definitely helps to see. Well, I'm going to show that to you right now. Also, knowing exactly the moisture level to keep alive but not rotting is hard to pin down. Well, thank you, just to someone. When I read this, I really appreciate it because I get these kinds of questions a lot, and I'm going to take you over here right now to those same little green giant hardwood cuttings that we've been doing videos on lately, and I'm going to show you exactly what callus looks like. That's right, we've only had them on the bottom heat for like, what, 2 weeks now? But there's already callus built up, I can guarantee it. We're going to go look at it now, and I'll show you exactly what the moisture level looks like. Alright, so here are our little cuttings, guys, and we stuck these several weeks ago. I don't even remember the exact date, but you can see that all of the bark is kind of dry right now on the top. But I'm going to pan the camera down here, and you can see that underneath I've got plenty of moisture built up. Now, I want to help you guys out a little bit with this because I get a lot of very specific questions. People, they just want to know, how do I do this perfectly without harming the cuttings? How do I make sure everything is perfect? And I want to tell you something right now. Nothing is perfect with cuttings. It's nature. There is such a broad range of what will actually work. What you want to focus on and what you want to pay attention to are the principles. So it's hard to give you an exact measurement. And we're going to look at this right now. I'm going to dig down into that stuff and show you. But there's a broad range of what will work. So you don't want it sopping wet, but you don't want it completely dry. And we're going to talk about the dry part of it here in a second. But there's a broad range of what you want. So stop worrying about these little guys. You don't have to be exactly precise. Now, about the dry medium that I want to talk about, I actually prefer for things to be on the slightly drier side. Not completely dry, not bone dry, not desert dry, but a little bit on the drier side, moist to dry. The more water you have that is creating a wet, sopping environment, the more likely you are to create an anaerobic environment which will rot your cuttings. Let's dig down into here right now. So just, you can see as I remove the surface of the soil, and we're talking like a ½ inch right there. You see there's some moisture. That's actually, I'm going to pull some of that out. That's actually, it's not wet. It's just moist. And you can see it's just lightly moistened, but it's cool and moist right there. And that's perfect for cuttings. You don't need a lot of water. We've talked about this in other videos. Go search the channel and you can learn more about it. But you don't want to, your cuttings are not actually absorbing water. They're not, you know, they're not using up the water in there right now. They just need a moist environment for the roots to start seeking out water and growing. So there you can see it right now. Let's go a little further and show you some more. I'm going to dig down, and it's about the same moisture level. It gets a little more moist down in there, 3 or 4 inches, but it's not dry. Now, I don't want this to continue drying out too much. And so what I'll probably do today is just lightly fan over it real quick to keep the surface a little bit moist so that that can spend some days evaporating and keep that moisture down below. But that's it. You see it right there. I hope that helps you guys see exactly how moist I have these cuttings. Now, I do have to be careful because I've got all of these guys on bottom heat right now, and I actually forgot to do something. Yeah, see, even my Kincaid's not perfect, but usually when I do these cuttings, I actually lift this up onto some little dowels or something so there's a little bit of space, because this mat gets much hotter than you want. I didn't do that. And this under here, let's lift this. You're not going to be able to see it, but I can feel it. It's too hot under there. Well, I don't want to say too hot because it's working, but I normally would want to lift this slightly, and you're going to have to determine that based on your heating mat. But let's show you real quick the Callus, because that was the other part of your question, was what does Callus look like? A lot of you may know, but I'm going to show that right now. So we stuck these a couple weeks ago. Let's just we'll find a couple. So I've got some heavier cuttings you can see, where that wood is real woody, and that was probably a couple years ago, that growth, or maybe last year, you know, but probably a couple years ago. You can see there's some fresher green growth. That was further out towards a tip. It was, you know, not quite as hardy. It was definitely last year's growth, but let's just pull this one up right now and see what kind of Callus we might have. And I don't want to strip too many of these because I really want these guys to do well, but it's only been a couple weeks, and here we are. Do you see that white bubbly stuff? We're still early on in the process here, so you're not going to see a lot of it. But that white bubbly stuff is Callus. That's all those little cells in there on the cambium layer just multiplying and dividing, and it's, you know, this guy is very much alive, and it's bubbling up with Callus, and that's where a lot of these roots are going to come out of. Not all of them. Some of them may come out of different places that you're not expecting, but you can even see it down in here a little bit. Hopefully the camera can pick that up. Let's get it closer. I'll kind of turn that at an angle so the light gets it. Let's see. That'll work right there. You can see that Callus down in there a little bit. Anyway, that's what Callus looks like. Let's get another cutting and see if we can. Now, also, I want you to see something. This guy right here, this little cutting right at this point looks a little bit brown, but at first I thought maybe it was dying back because of the bottom heat, but it's not. I can see Callus. Hopefully the camera's picking that up, but I can see Callus all down in there. All down in there. And so anyway, this is working well. Let's get another cutting. Alright, so I stuck him back in his happy little home there. Let's grab one of these thicker cuttings and just see what it looks like. Pull this guy up. There it is. Do you see that Callus? There's some more of it right there. Beautiful Callus just bubbling up. You can see it right along that cutting. And I think I am going to turn the heat down. You can see it's a little more moist down there in the center. A little bit more moist. And that heat could contribute to some rot. We're not going to have a problem with these things, but I'm going to shove him back down in there, and let's see if we can find another one. Let's pull this big, fat, thick, stocky guy up. He's out towards the edge a little bit. And we don't have any Callus really on him. Put him back. I don't want to disturb too many of these, but you know, it's all in the name of science, right? Let's pull this guy up and see what we've got. You see that little bit of Callus just building up there? That is not mold, that is Callus. And that's what you want. Here's another one with some really nice stuff building up in there. You see that? That's what we want forming there. See that white stuff there? That's all those cells just growing and dividing like crazy. These guys want to form some roots. Alright, so there you go. That's the whole Callus and moisture story right there. Now, I don't want to take any more of those guys out of there because I really want these to root. I'm growing a hedge along my property and I want to get as many of these out of here as I can. So, what I'll probably do is take all of these off the bottom heat. That whole tray, I'll just pull it off. Somebody asked a question about that too. How long do you leave them in that tray? You know, let's just answer all the questions right now. You don't need a hoop house. You don't need a greenhouse. I'm getting that a lot. You can do this on your back porch. But what I'll do is take that whole tray off the bottom heat in another week or so, We'll put it somewhere back over here, and it will cool down a little bit, but the temperatures are warming up. We're in the beginning of May right now. I'm not worried about frost anymore, and as the temperatures slowly wake up, those plants will slowly start rooting. This is a long game. This is a patience game, and it's going to take time for this to fully build. It's not going to happen in 3 weeks. So I will take those off, set them down, and totally forget about them. I'll just come out here and I'll water them when I water everything else, and it's no big deal. I just leave it alone. Once I start seeing roots come through the edge of those, the tote there and growing, then I'll start fertilizing. And then I'll leave them in there all summer, all the way around through the winter. Through the winter, they'll go dormant, those little rooted cuttings, and they'll start hardening off. And then those roots are tough, like you saw in that first video, or the second video, whichever one it was, and you can tear them apart really easily, and they're hard and strong. You stick them in the pots, and then you're good to go. You're good to go from there on. And that's what they'll look like from there on. These little guys that we just potted up in the last video, and you can see they're already starting to put on some of that lime green growth. These guys grow like crazy, man. And so look at this, all of this new growth right here. It's just absolutely beautiful. And I love this time of year when everything just starts waking up and growing like crazy. It's amazing, guys. But this is what they'll end up like. Now I had another question. We're going to answer this one too. How long do you leave them in these pots? Well, you technically could plant them out. People always want to know, how fast can I plant them out? I could plant these out on my property, but then they're so tiny and they're so small and they're so young that, you know, anything could come along and step on it or pull it out of the ground. You know, I really like to grow these things in these pots and keep them protected for, I don't know, a year or two. And here's the thing, I'm going to show you something else. All of these guys right back in here are from 2 years ago. Not last spring, but the spring before we took these cuttings. And this is how fast, after I potted them up, just like those, last spring, they went through the summer and did this, and then went dormant. And so I could plant those out. You could really start planting them out at this stage. I don't want to do that yet. And here's what I think people get hung up with. They go, but I want to get these things growing fast. I want this hedge to come along fast. Well, you could plant them out now. It's not going to be a problem, but they'll grow so much faster and get a better start in the beginning. If you got them in a spot where they're all in one spot, you can walk out with a hose. They're somewhat protected. They don't have to be in a hoop house, but they're all together, maybe on the north side of a building if you're in the northern hemisphere, southern side of a building if you're in the southern hemisphere, but somewhat protected to where, and in one spot to where you can water them frequently. You can keep an eye on them frequently and they'll grow even bigger. Here's where people get hung up. They want to do it right now. But here's the thing, by growing them in here another year, I don't have a hedge yet anyway with these guys. They're still too small to form a hedge. They're gonna get up to this high in 1 more year. They're still growing in here, even though they're not growing in the ground yet. But when I plant them out next year, they'll be that much bigger and that much more hardy and ready to withstand the elements and the deer or anything else that's coming at them. And that's the final thing I want to talk to you guys about, and that's the deer. So people ask all the time, are these things deer proof? Well, I have a hard time saying that anything is deer proof. There are many plants that are deer resistant, but even the deer proof plants, the deer will usually walk up to the plant in the middle of winter when there's not much else to eat for them, and they'll nibble a little bit on something. And when they find out it's poisonous or they don't like it, then they'll walk away. But you may occasionally find a nibble. And that's the one problem I've run into with these guys with deer. And it's not that much of a problem. There's actually two, and I'll explain it here. But let me show you. So these plants eventually form these central leaders where, you know, right now it's still trying to figure out who's going to be the main central leader. And I might come back here shortly and snip one of these off and just make sure one branch is going up so it's a tree. But what the deer do is they'll walk around. They don't do it in the summer and the spring. When they do it is in the winter when there's nothing else to eat. And they'll just nibble the tip right off of the top after it's grown up 4 foot or something. And then they walk away. They don't mess with it otherwise. They don't eat all the branches. These things are left totally intact. But they'll nibble the tip, and what that does is it stunts it, it forces it the next spring to try and find a new central leader. So it takes a little longer for them to come up. If you used a deer spray or some way to deter them, or you had a dog, it wouldn't be a problem. But that's one of the only problems I found with deer in these plants. They're about as deer proof as you're going to get, but the deer will occasionally nibble just the tip off of 1 or 2 or 10 of them, depending on how many you've got planted out. And then when they find that they're not good for them, they'll walk away. Here's the other problem I've run into with them, and this is a very aggravating problem, but I think I'm gonna spray this year to try and keep them away. They haven't affected, the majority, probably 95% of my green giants are growing great. But there's a couple of them out there that for some reason, those bucks, when they start getting their horns in the fall and they're trying to rub that velvet off, they like to walk up to these things because they're a tall stick and they start rubbing their antlers all over them and stripping branches. There's probably 5, maybe 6 of them out there throughout everything I've planted. I've planted like 150 of these things. But there's probably 5 or 6 where they've walked up and stripped the branches. One of them got so bad I had to cut it back to the ground, and it already started growing new branches up last summer. So these things bounce back pretty quick. But that has been a problem with the deer. So just kind of be aware of that if you're going to plant these. You're going to want some way to keep deer away. And finally, about the deer, I get a lot of these questions from people over on the East Coast. I don't know what to tell you. You guys over on the East Coast must have like Terminator deer, because I'm hearing people say they're eating rhododendrons and green giants down to the ground, and rhododendrons are poisonous. Every part of the plant is poisonous to deer, to any animal. In fact, there are when bees make honey out of rhododendrons, it is poisonous. It's hallucinogenic, and there are tribes throughout the world who actually look for rhododendron honey to get the hallucinogenic effects. So I think you people on the East Coast have robotic Terminator deer that have iron guts and nothing will challenge them. I don't know what the issue is over there, if there's just too much deer pressure or what it is, but it's not a problem over here like it is over there. You guys have seen I've got 1,000 rhododendrons out in my landscape and the deer don't even touch them. So anyway, I hope that answer some of your guys' questions about these green giants, hardwood cuttings, the moisture issues, the callus, the rooting, where we go from here. We'll just kind of make a part 3 out of this because I know some of you guys are really interested in it. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you learned something from it. And if you liked it, hit the like button, subscribe if you want to follow along and see more fantastic gardening videos. Have a fantastic week, guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Adios.